Founding father and second president John Adams famously said, "Our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." Underneath what Adams was really saying is, it's the values, the morality, and the heart that beats from Christianity. That's the glue of America. Our Constitution, the laws that spring from it, will only work if the values of our citizens, lived day in and day out, support them. Join former Bush administration policy advisor Tim Goeglein and me on Priming Pillars as we examine what changed and the practical steps to restore a God-honoring culture. Hi, I'm Paul Weber, founder of Pillars on Purpose, and it's a blessing to spend this time with longtime friend Tim Goeglein. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Paul. It is really great to be with you.
Well, Tim, you have publicly served at the intersection of faith and policy throughout your entire career, first with Senator Dan Coates of Indiana, ultimately as communications director, then with President George W. Bush as his deputy director focused on outreach to the faith community, conservative and veterans groups. You've also served as a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation and professor of government at Liberty University. You've authored several books, the latest being What Really Matters, which will be the foundation of our focus today. And speaking of focus, you now serve as the Vice President of External and Government Relations at Focus on the Family. Tim, what drives this calling for you?
Well, I grew up in a Christian home, and I grew up in a happy home. And my mother and father taught me as a young boy, and I'll never forget the conversation I had with my father when I was about 7 or 8 years old. He said to me, "Tim, I don't mind what you do in life. Just make sure that when you go over the mountain, you're singing." I've never forgotten that. And to know that my mother and father believed in me as a young boy, raised in a faith-filled home, I think really formed and shaped me. And being a Lutheran Christian, I was taught in my catechetical class the beautiful explication of what constitutes the life worth living by Martin Luther, a series of beautiful writings on the idea of vocation. That's a fancy way of saying, why in the world were you put on this earth? And for me, it has always been the intersection of a combination of people, politics, public policy, and the press. And so, as you say, 10 years in the Senate, 8 years at the White House, 18 years at Focus on the Family, all as a Christian, all as a conservative, living and working inside the Beltway. It's never been dull. So my vocation is a combination that results really in that intersection of faith and public life. It's where I'm most comfortable, and I love people. And I will tell you, Washington, D.C., for all of the criticisms as swamp, it's a lively place with a lot of very interesting people.
Well, you master it perfectly, and having traipsed the beaches of Normandy with both you and your father, I can see him giving you that wonderful advice, and you have followed it to a T. So, Tim, every day we open up TikTok, Twitter, and turn on the TV, and it seems that there is another direct assault on the family. Is that a coincidence or just my imagination?
No, it is primarily the reason that I wrote What Really Matters. This is my fifth book. And I'll say with great humility, I think it has the right title that I can take no credit for. Because in the academic year, Paul, in behalf of Focus on the Family, I'm on a different college campus every week or every other week. Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Cornell, Liberty, Hillsdale, the Concordias, the gamut. And 2 years ago, after I spoke at Cornell, a young woman raised her hand and she said something like, "Mr. Goeglein, I think that I agree with most of what you've said, but the question I'd like to ask is why, for all the issues that the political class seems to speak about, why do they not find time to really advocate and speak for what really matters?" And I thought to myself, bingo, I couldn't agree more. because the public policy realm in Washington is dominated, and rightfully many days, by immigration, border, taxes, the war, all of those issues. Of course, they matter. But what really matters most, and thus the title of the book, in my view, is a robust defense of and advocacy for marriage, family, parenting, human life, religious liberty, conscience rights, parental rights, pronouns with fixed meanings. I mean, here we are, Paul, in the 250th year of our constitutional republic. The Spanish, the Italians, the French, the British, they don't know when they were born, but we know when we were born, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on July 4th, 1776. And baked into the cake, we love the Declaration, no doubt about that. But baked into our founding was healthy marriage, healthy families, a healthy intergenerational connection. A love of liberty was seen as consonant with faith. And the things that matter. So it seems to me that we're on a voyage of rediscovery, and I'm a hopefulist. I believe that we're no longer in the moral and social revolution of the 60s and 70s and 80s. I think we're off on a new path, despite the cultural challenges that we have.
Tim, as we circle to the family and focus on the family, is there a driving force? Is there like a singular driving force that you see that is constantly working to undermine the family?
Well, it seems to me, Paul, that we are in the midst of a major national spiritual crisis. In fact,
Indeed.
if someone said to me, what is the number one problem bedeviling America in 21st century America, I would say it's a spiritual crisis catalyzed by the moral relativism that was baked into the whole project of the social and moral revolution of the 1960s and
Mm-hmm.
70s. And even
Mm-hmm.
though we are no longer formally in the middle of all of that, the contrails are enormous. And I think that if you can imagine, the word picture would be like the moral revolution is the bowling ball. And the pins are marriage, family, parenting, human life, religious liberty, conscience rights, pronouns, et cetera, et cetera. And it was that the ball smashes into the pins. Now, the idea is that the game goes on and you have to reset the pins. And I think that that's what we're in the midst of. But I think it's fair to say, and I say this to people of goodwill of both the left and the right, most people never would have imagined that we would ever have a president of the United States who, in his inaugural address, would say it is the official policy of the federal government that we have two sexes, male and female. Much less standing in front of the portrait of one of the most historically iconic images in the American experience. So, my sense is that we have a large reclamation, reformation, regeneration, renewal, restoration project ahead of us, and I think we've started down that road.
Well, Tim, oh, for the days when I was a manual pin setter and things were a lot simpler in those days. But you've hit on the theme of your book. The overarching theme of your book is restoration. Restoration of these six morally, politically, and socially significant and hotly debated cultural pillars. Those being, as you mentioned, marriage, family, the American male, and I can't wait to get into that one, a well-ordered society, faith, and the importance of history. So your approach in this book is quite interesting. I found it very interesting because you have written a number of essays over the years, and they have received wide audience, and you've compiled them into this wonderful book, What Really Matters. So can you tell a little bit about why this approach and who your intended audience is?
I'd love to. I was in a debate just a couple of years ago, and the debate was, what is the way forward for America? And my interlocutor, who is very smart and very bright, and who I really, respect a lot, even though I very strongly disagree with her, she came to the debate with a host of briefing papers. And those briefing papers were rooted in taxation, regulation, et cetera, et cetera. And I told her in real time that even though I disagreed with her approach, I understood her analysis. I live and work in Washington, and progressive analysis is baked into the DNA of the swamp. I said to my interlocutor, my view is that if we are having a serious conversation about the way forward for America, then we have to address the lowest marriage rates in American history. We have to address the lowest fertility rates in American history. I said to her what I say to you, Paul, if you and I were having this wonderful dialogue, not 1,000 years ago, but just in 1970, in 1970, 80% of all American homes were comprised of a married husband and wife. That number today is 44%. I mean, that's more than a 30% drop. That is shocking. By the way, in 2026, if you ask the question, what percentage of American homes are comprised of a married husband and wife with at least one biological child who is 18 years of age or under, that number is only 22%. So I'll ring the bell backwards. Only 22% of all American homes in a country of 340 million people is comprised of a married husband and wife with at least one child. So the impact is not just a data point, or a statistic. We're talking about the way forward for America. These are very, very important statistics. The majority of babies born to American women, ages 30 years of age and under, are now born out of wedlock. The majority of babies in America in 2025, the majority of them were born to women in their 30s, not in their 20s. So this debate that resulted in a now Supreme Court justice saying that she could not define a woman, even though we know that she can define a woman, that results in a president of the United States declaring that we have an official federal government policy, not of many genders, but of male and female. It gets to the heart of your question, doesn't it? So it seems to me that this idea of American restoration, it's much deeper than tax policy and the borders.
Well, it certainly is very intertwined, very complex. There's no singular answer. But if you were to inform our audience to take action in one way, how would you inform us or advise us to start to take action toward these complex issues?
Well, I believe that American restoration begins at the most local level. I do not believe
Mm-hmm.
that Washington, D.C. is ever going to save a marriage or tuck a child into bed at night. Now, Washington, D.C. can
Mm-hmm.
incentivize the breaking up of a marriage or the breaking up of a family. Or, if I may say, the result of policy that is not good for children. In fact, Washington is quite good at that. Silicon Valley is not going to resolve this issue. Wall Street and Hollywood, they're not going to resolve these issues either. In my very strongly held view, and one of the reasons I wanted to write What Really Matters is because I believe that the specific answers to these questions are at the most local level. They are in our local congregations, churches, and parishes. The church simply has got to step up. The issue of resolution is in our communities. It's in our neighborhoods. It's in civic associations. My view is that on at least one thing, the former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill of Massachusetts, was right, which is that all politics is local. All public policy solutions
Is
to the
local.
major issues of our time, absolutely. The answers are local.
Well, we've said here often that good public policy is nothing but loving your neighbor as yourself to scale. So, Tim, I think you're dead on when you say that getting to the restoration theme, it really is the responsibility of the body of Christ. I mean, isn't that why we are here as Christians, is to be salt and light to the culture around us?
Absolutely right. And I'd like to share, I know that anecdotes are not data, Paul, but I'd like to share something, if I may, because I think it was so dramatic. Just before the last presidential election, I was invited to speak to a very large auditorium of pastors. And I did not come to that auditorium, to bang the drum for the Republicans or the Democrats. I just wanted to speak about good public policy, some of
Mm-hmm.
the issues that we've discussed today. And I said at the very end of it that it's time as never before for pastors and congregations to engage. And then we came to the Q&A, and one pastor raised his hand, and he said something like, Mr. Goeglein, we're just trying to keep our heads down. That's what we're trying to do. He said, we just don't care about
Mm.
Washington, D.C. And I shook my head. I really did. And I said, well, that explains a lot.
Yeah.
I said, because first, democracy is not a spectator sport. Secondly, it's time as never before to engage. And the third thing I said is that you may not care about Washington, but Washington, D.C. cares a lot about American religion and about the fate and state of churches. And by the way, the Biden-Harris administration, we're now learning, was almost preoccupied about what was going on in churches, parishes, congregations, etc. So this idea that the church can be the church on Wednesday night or Sunday morning, but then at the other remove, kind of separate or stand outside the public square is simply ahistorical. It does not comport in any manner with the history of the United States of America and the very robust and active role of the church in the American Revolution, in the suffrage of women, in abolition of the slave trades, in the pro-life movement, in the pro-marriage movement. The church has simply always been not just a part, it's been foundational.
Sure has. And as you know, going back to the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton famously said, we have freedom of worship in this country. That was sort of a dog whistle to say, you can do what you want in the four walls of your church, but once you leave the four walls of your church, you now have to comport to some sort of secularized society. And right here at Pillars on Purpose, we have this tagline that says, know God, stand firm on his word, take action, balancing grace and truth really well. So as we look at this kind of current dynamic that we're in, what is the word to the church? It starts with us. What's your word to the church to get us out of our comfort zone?
My word to the church to get us out of our comfort zone goes to the rising generation of young men and women of faith. I think I have over time read every word that George Orwell ever wrote. He's one of my favorite public intellectuals. And he said it's the first
Mm-hmm.
duty of an intelligent man to restate the obvious. And I think we are, Paul, in an era where we need to restate the obvious with the rising generation of young men and women. We can no longer
Mm-hmm.
assume that they know what a healthy marriage is, or the goodness of marriage, the goodness of babies, the goodness of children, the goodness of a stable religious and faith informed life, across their entire life. In What Really Matters, I do an entire chapter on restoring the good life, because I think we have to
Mm-hmm.
tell this generation and not assume that the generation has a sense of it about what constitutes a life well lived. And I say that out of love and respect and as an inveterate optimist. You know, I did a chapter in What Really Matters because it's our 250th birthday on restoring American history. I mean, I think we should be
Mm-hmm.
shocked that only 13% of American eighth graders are even basically proficient in the American story, which is to say, if they're given a pen or pencil and a piece of paper, my, how old fashioned, can they put in order the American Revolution, the Civil War, two world wars, the Cold War, the Great Depression? The answer is that by and large, they cannot. And I didn't come to the program to criticize anyone. We've spent billions of dollars, and we've gone backwards. So this idea of being in a post-literate age, this idea of being in an age where math, science, literacy, culture, history is at the center of American education is simply not the case. Now, the great news is, as I write about, it's true in homeschooling. It's true in private religious education. I'm thrilled that we have a booming number of charter schools, school choice. That to me is all to the good. May those things continue, because we have a work of remarkable reclamation and revival ahead of us.
We do. The challenge we face is that the body of Christ and our younger generations are seeing the culture around them. They're bought into two-parent working. They're bought into delaying marriage until later in life. They're bought into lowering the birth rates, making their families smaller. They feel the pressure of this financial crush. I'm eager to get your opinion on what you think we can be saying to the 20 to 25, 25 to 30-year-olds about find that mate, get married, get get into having a family and seeing the blessing that comes from having being fruitful and multiplying, as God says.
Yeah, I write about this because I think
Mm-hmm.
that any church of any size in the United States, I mean, from the largest churches to the smallest ones, I believe firmly, Paul, that if every church does not have a specific ministry outreach to young American men and to young
Mm-hmm.
American women, they are totally missing the boat.
Mm.
Because young men and women, and I spent a lot of time with them, they have lived through brokenness, unevenness. They have lived through, a cultural battle royale. And mostly they want stability. They want continuity. They are actually hungry to read the Bible, to understand the goodness of religion. We are living through a dating recession. We're living through a loneliness crisis. Why is this?
Mm-hmm.
I think in
Mm.
part we can say because of what happened in the year 2010. That was the year where the smartphone was introduced. And so
Mm.
many people thought, my gosh, this is like a miracle. Well, in many ways, it's a great thing. But when you give a smartphone to a young person with no guardrails, it incentivizes apartness. It incentivizes individualism. Above all, the number one thing, Paul, that overrides what really matters is that we are made for real relationships. A relationship with a husband or a wife for a lifetime, a relationship with our children, a relationship with our friends and community and colleagues and co-parishioners, our fellow congregants. We are called upon, from the very beginning of our lives to be a part of a community. And yet in the digital age, as we know from all the best empirical research, young people are incentivized through most of our most important cultural institutions to apartness and to living part of their lives in the proverbial rabbit hole. And I think what really matters says just the opposite. Live counterculturally, live counterintuitively. Put that rectangle that seems to be chained around your wrist away, even for 2 and 3 and 4 hours at a time, and rediscover the beauty of other people who are made in the image of God.
Tim, as I was about to mention, we have covered so much ground so quickly on marriage and family and our nation and the role of the church and the importance of the church to stand firm and take action. Tim, I'd like to hold you over and do a second part, if you will. And really, I would like to plumb into your chapters on the American male, on faith, the importance of faith, and then lastly, a well-ordered society and the importance of history. Are you okay to hang with us for a part two of the Priming Pillars podcast?
You bet, my friend.
And we were thrilled that Tim was able to stay with us for a second Priming Pillars podcast. We'll be uploading that conversation shortly to our website at pillarsonpurpose.com and right here on our YouTube channel. And while you're there, you can check out our podcasts focusing on knowing God, standing firm, and taking action. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. Pillars on Purpose is a nonprofit 501c3 ministry. Your gifts keep us casting and discipling next-gen leaders committed to living as pillars for faith, pillars in community, and pillars of witness to our world. Because at Pillars on Purpose, we envision a world anew through the inspired few like Tim Goeglein, who reach the many to proclaim the one.